I'm 32, work in IT, and I've spent the last 5 years watching my older brother systematically lie to our entire family while they applauded him for it. Last month he got caught. But here's the thing nobody expected. Our grandfathers had already solved the problem before anyone even knew there was one. My name doesn't matter much in this story. What matters is understanding how someone you grew up with can look you dead in the eye and rob you blind while your parents defend them for doing it. Let me set the scene. My family wasn't rich, but my grandfather was old money. Real estate, smart investments, the whole deal. When he passed 3 years ago, he had a lawyer divide everything meticulously. My brother got the lake house. I got 200 grand in a trust that matured last year. My sister got some rental properties. My parents got his investment portfolio. Everything seemed fair enough at the time. But here's what I didn't know. My brother had been planning something for years. See, my brother is charismatic. People love him. He's good-looking, charming, knows how to work a room. He's also never really worked a day in his life. He bounced between jobs, always had excuses, always needed money. And my parents, God bless them, always gave it to him. But 3 years ago, something shifted. He got married to this woman named Elle. She came from nothing, wanted everything, and somehow convinced my brother that he deserved more than what Grandpa left him. That's when the real show started. First it was subtle. He'd mentioned to my parents how unfair the will was. How come I got 200 grand in cash but he got a house? Never mind that the house was worth 400,000. Never mind that rental income doesn't hit your account like a check does. He spun this narrative where he was the victim and I was somehow the golden child. My parents started buying into it slowly without even realizing it. Then came the pressure campaign. He'd show up at family dinners with Elle, and they'd strategically mention financial stress, how the property taxes on the lake house were killing them, how they needed to take out loans just to maintain it, how unfair it was that I got liquid cash while they were house poor. Meanwhile, my brother was driving a brand new Range Rover. I saw the lease agreement by accident one day when he left his email open at my parents' place. $92,000 lease. But sure, buddy, you're struggling. My parents started to side with him. I watched it happen like watching someone slowly poison themselves. My mom would text me things like, "Your brother's really going through it right now." My dad sat me down once and suggested that maybe I should gift my brother some money to help with the house. I said no, firmly, and that's when the family started treating me like I was selfish, like I was the problem. Here's where it gets darker. My brother started a business, an investment firm that was completely unregistered and completely bogus. He approached me first, wanted me to invest my entire 200 grand. He said we could triple it in 18 months. When I refused, he went to my parents, and they actually considered giving him money. My mom asked me for advice on whether they should loan him $50,000. I told her the truth, it was a scam. My own brother was running a Ponzi scheme dressed up in a suit and cologne. My father actually got upset with me. He said I was being paranoid, that I didn't trust my brother, that family should come first. I reminded him that family doesn't ask family to funnel money into unregistered investment schemes. He didn't appreciate that. Neither did my brother when my parents told him I'd warned them off. After that, things got nasty. My brother started a whisper campaign. He told people, mutual friends, extended family, that I was financially abusing my parents, that I refused to help them, that I was hoarding my inheritance like some greedy bastard while my parents struggled. He told people I'd gotten money from Grandpa specifically to buy my way out of family obligations. Complete fabrications. But lies travel faster than truth, and my brother was a masterful liar. Elle got involved too, which made it worse. She started messaging my parents about family healing. She'd say things like, "We just want everyone to be happy, but it's hard when my name won't help." She'd frame it all as concern, but it was pure manipulation. Meanwhile, their house was being used as collateral for business loans my brother was taking out. They didn't even know. He forged documents, their signatures, on loan applications. That's fraud, by the way. Federal fraud. Then came the moment that changed everything. My brother took out a $250,000 home equity loan against the lake house, the house that was supposed to be his inheritance to keep, not leverage. He did it without telling my parents. The bank contacted my mother asking about the recent loan application. That's how she found out. She called me completely shattered, finally understanding what her golden child had done. My father, to his credit, called a family meeting. My brother walked in confident, ready to spin another story. But this time my mom had the paperwork. She had the fraudulent documents. She had the evidence that he'd essentially stolen their house to fund his fake investment scheme. And he just sat there, smirked actually, told my parents that business requires risk and that they shouldn't be so emotional about this. That's when my father stood up. I've never seen my dad angry like that. His hands were shaking. He told my brother to leave, not the meeting. Leave, as in move out. My parents were in their mid-60s, and their son had just committed federal fraud against them. But here's the beautiful part, the part that makes this story worth telling. My grandfather had apparently anticipated something like this all along. My grandfather's lawyer called me the day after the family meeting. Apparently, there was a secondary provision in the will that nobody had discussed publicly. It was meant to be activated only if certain conditions were met. Specifically, if any beneficiary committed fraud, embezzlement, or financial crimes related to their inheritance. The lawyer had been monitoring everything. He'd seen the loan applications. He'd seen my brother's fake investment firm. He'd documented it all. And now, as Grandpa's estate executor, he had the authority to act. What happened next was orchestrated with precision. The lawyer immediately filed a fraud claim against my brother on behalf of the estate, because technically, by forging documents and taking out loans against inherited property, my brother had committed fraud against the estate itself. The lake house was trust property. What he did was illegal, seriously illegal. My brother, still confident, thought he could talk his way through it. He hired an attorney who specialized in white-collar crime. Cost him about $30,000. My grandfather's lawyer, who'd been handling estates for 40 years, just smiled. He had documentation dating back 3 years. He had emails my brother had sent to loan officers. He had the forged signatures. He had everything. The case moved through civil court first. My brother's attorney argued that the documents were authorization based on verbal agreement. The judge wasn't amused. She ordered a full investigation. That's when federal authorities got involved. Turns out, taking out fraudulent loans against property you don't solely own is a bigger deal than my brother realized. The FBI knocked on his door about 2 weeks later. My parents were devastated but also relieved. They'd finally seen their son for what he was. Elle disappeared sometime around then. Apparently, she'd been part of the scheme from the beginning. She'd encouraged the fraud, suggested the fake documents, the whole thing. She filed for divorce from my brother while he was dealing with federal charges. Took her cut and vanished. Some women, man. The federal case took about 8 months to resolve. My brother took a plea deal, 2 years in federal prison, restitution of $450,000, and permanent loss of his inheritance. The lake house was seized, sold, and the proceeds went to my parents to cover the fraudulent loans. Federal sentencing is no joke. The judge was clear that white-collar fraud gets treated seriously in her court, especially when family property is involved. But here's where my revenge comes in, because yes, I did take revenge. Not in a violent way, not even in a particularly aggressive way. I just made sure he understood what he'd done. I gathered everything, every lie, every manipulation, every financial crime, and I compiled it into a detailed timeline. I sent it to every family member, not to humiliate him, but to make sure everyone understood the complete picture of what he'd actually done. No editorializing, just facts. I also made sure his employer, the job he'd gotten after everything fell apart, received a complete copy. No criminal conviction on paper yet. He was awaiting sentencing, but his employer had a right to know who they were employing. He got fired within a day. I sent detailed financial documents to his divorce attorney so that Elle couldn't claim she was blindsided or victimized. She'd been complicit. She should face the consequences of her choices too. I hired a forensic accountant to trace every dollar of the investment scheme's investments, the ones that had actually happened before federal authorities seized everything. I made sure every person who'd given money to my brother's fake investment firm was contacted and informed of the fraud. Some recovered money through the legal process, some didn't, but everyone everyone knew the truth. My brother's reputation was completely, thoroughly destroyed. Then came the really satisfying part. My grandfather's lawyer had included one more provision in the will that's pretty rare. Because my brother had committed fraud against the estate and the trust, the original terms of his inheritance were voided. The lake house, instead of being his, reverted to my parents, legally, cleanly, with full estate authority. They were furious with him but grateful to have the asset back. They sold it 6 months later and used the proceeds to retire early. They actually thanked me. First time in years they treated me like I wasn't the selfish one. My brother's federal sentencing came down to 2 years minimum security, which honestly felt light for what he did. He lost everything: the lake house, his savings, his marriage, his career, his family's trust. Meanwhile, I used my 200 grand inheritance exactly as my grandfather probably intended. I invested it properly, watched it grow, and built a real future for myself. The dark humor part that I didn't appreciate until months later: my brother had been so desperate to get his hands on my money that he destroyed his own life in the process. He thought I was the problem, the obstacle between him and wealth. Turns out, I was the only thing standing between him and federal prison for a few extra years. He might want to send me a thank you card if he ever gets out. Elle reached out to me once, about a year after everything collapsed. She wanted to know if I could put in a good word with my family so she could reconnect with them. I told her that my family had moved on and suggested she do the same. She'd been complicit in federal fraud and thought apologies would fix it. The audacity was almost impressive. My parents and I are closer now than we've been in a decade. There's this understanding between us that we almost lost everything because we weren't willing to see the truth about someone we loved. That's the real lesson here. Love doesn't mean enabling. Family doesn't mean accepting fraud. And sometimes the people we protect the most are the ones most willing to destroy us. My brother gets out in about 8 months. I don't know what he'll do then. I don't really care. My life moved forward. His didn't. That's not something I orchestrated out of malice. That's just the natural consequence of his choices. He committed federal crimes and faced federal consequences. I simply made sure he couldn't hide from either. People ask me if I feel guilty about what happened to my brother. Honestly, no. I feel regretful that it had to happen at all, but guilty? That requires me to have actually done something wrong. I reported facts. I provided documentation. I ensured transparency. He committed the crimes. He made the choices. He faced the consequences. That's not revenge. That's justice. What I do feel is disappointed that he was given every opportunity to make better choices and rejected them all. My grandfather left him a $400,000 house. That's generational wealth. He could have paid property taxes, built equity, and eventually sold it for profit if he wanted out. Instead, he decided to commit federal fraud because he wanted more than what he'd been given. That's the part that still bothers me. Not what I did, but what he couldn't accept. My parents told me something about a year after my brother's sentencing that put everything in perspective. Apparently, my grandfather had suspected this might happen. He'd taken out life insurance on my brother when he was born, naming my parents as beneficiaries, specifically for unfortunate circumstances. When my brother went to federal prison, my parents collected that insurance payout. It was substantial. My grandfather had literally planned for the possibility that his own grandson might become a problem. That's when I realized something. My grandfather's will, the whole structure of it, the secondary provisions, the legal protections, had been designed not just to distribute wealth fairly, but to protect against exactly this scenario. He'd seen enough of humanity to understand that money brings out the worst in some people. He'd built safeguards, and it actually worked. Not perfectly, but it worked. There's this weird moment when you realize that someone who's been dead for years has protected you from something you didn't even know was coming. My grandfather had essentially set a trap for my brother without my brother even realizing it. Every illegal action my brother took was documented, monitored, and could be traced directly back to him. The old man was brilliant. I eventually moved out of the city where my family lives. Not because of my brother, but because my career took me somewhere better. I'm living in a different state, doing well financially, and I've built relationships that aren't complicated by family drama. My parents visit sometimes. We have a better relationship relationship now than we did when my brother was around demanding attention. They're happier, healthier. My mom actually started a garden hobby she'd always talked about. My dad goes fishing on weekends without worrying about my brother's financial crises. My sister reached out to me about 2 years after everything happened. She wanted to apologize for not being more present during the chaos. I told her it wasn't her responsibility to manage our brother's behavior. We've gotten closer since. She's kept the rental properties from the inheritance, and she's actually good at managing real estate. She's probably worth more now than all of us combined. Funny how things work out when people actually try instead of manipulate. The hardest part, if I'm being honest, is that I know my brother is still angry with me. He blames me for his situation, even though he created every single circumstance that led to his conviction. That's his choice to carry that resentment. He'll get out of prison, probably struggle to find employment because of his record, and have to rebuild his life from literally nothing. And yes, some of that is directly because of my actions, reporting the fraud, ensuring transparency, refusing to let him hide behind lies. But here's the thing. He would have done the exact same thing to me without hesitation. He would have taken my inheritance, discredited me to our family, and felt completely justified doing it. The only difference between me and him is that I refused to participate in his dishonesty. I chose the truth over family comfort, and that choice, however difficult it was the right one. There's this concept in psychology called schadenfreude, pleasure derived from someone else's misfortune. I don't think what I feel is that. I think it's just satisfaction that justice worked exactly like it's supposed to work. My brother committed crimes. My brother faced consequences. The system worked. That's not me being happy he's suffering. That's me being relieved that actions actually have consequences, even when those actions come from people we're supposed to love unconditionally. My therapist, and yes, I saw a therapist after all this, said something that stuck with me. She said that my brother spent so much energy trying to get what I had that he never actually did the work to build his own wealth. He wanted the shortcut. He wanted to skip the part where you actually earn things. And when my grandfather didn't give him the easy path, he tried to take it through crime. That's a character flaw, not something I created or caused. I'm not going to say I'm thriving because my brother's in prison. I'm thriving because I made good choices with my money, I built my career, and I refused to participate in dishonesty even when it would have been easier to just go along with it. Those two things aren't actually connected. He's dealing with the consequences of his crimes. I'm just living my life the way I've always wanted to. But if I'm being completely honest, there's definitely some satisfaction in knowing that he thought he could outsmart me and he couldn't. There's definitely something that feels right about the fact that his own lies destroyed him. And there's absolutely something gratifying about the knowledge that my grandfather set this entire thing up and it worked exactly like he probably hoped it would. The day my brother got transferred to federal prison, I was at the beach. Just a normal Saturday. I didn't plan it that way. I didn't even know that was the day. But when I found out later, there was something poetic about it. While he was being processed into prison, I was watching the ocean, living my life, moving forward. He was stuck, still caught in the consequences of his own greed. People online sometimes ask if I regret being so thorough with my revenge, if I think I could have just let it go. And the answer is honestly no. Here's why. People like my brother are only stopped by consequences. They don't stop because you ask nicely. They don't stop because it's the right thing. They stop when their actions catch up with them. My brother needed to face real consequences for his crimes. My family needed to understand what he was actually doing. And everyone who got caught up in his scheme needed to know the truth about how completely fake his entire enterprise was. I didn't create his circumstances. I just refused to pretend they didn't exist. I didn't make him commit fraud. I just made sure that fraud didn't go unnoticed or unpunished. There's a difference between revenge and justice, and I'm confident that what I did falls on the justice side of that line. The most bizarre part of this whole story is that my brother actually tried to appeal his conviction 2 years in. His appeal claimed that his family had conspired against him to prevent him from accessing his rightful inheritance. The court reviewed it in about 2 minutes and denied it. His attorney probably charged him 10 grand for that. I hope he had good prison savings to cover it. What's interesting is that my parents never regretted cutting him off. They regretted that they been manipulated for so long, but they never regretted the actual decision to enforce consequences. They actually set up a more detailed estate plan after all this, with more specific protections against fraud and financial crimes. They made my sister and me power of attorney with really clear restrictions. They learned from the experience. I haven't seen my brother in person since the family meeting where my parents asked him to leave. I don't plan to, not out of vindictiveness, but because there's just nothing there anymore. He stole from our parents, he tried to manipulate our entire family, he committed federal crimes, and then he blamed me for consequences he created himself. That's not someone I want in my life. That's not someone worth investing emotional energy in. The revenge itself wasn't some complicated plan. It was just me refusing to help him hide. I didn't bait him. I didn't entrap him. I just said no to his schemes and then made sure the truth came out when it was discovered. Sometimes the best revenge is simply not participating in someone else's dishonesty. My grandfather would probably find this all pretty amusing. He set up a system to protect his family from exactly this type of behavior, and it worked perfectly. He probably anticipated that one of his descendants would eventually let greed override integrity, and he made sure that person couldn't destroy everyone else in the process. That's not just good estate planning. That's wisdom. That's actually looking out for your family. I think about him sometimes when I make financial decisions, when I'm tempted to take easy shortcuts, when I consider doing something unethical because it might benefit me in the short term. I always remember that my grandfather had built systems that would catch people doing exactly that. And I don't want to be caught. I want to build the right way. I want to earn things. I want to look at myself in the mirror. My brother will eventually get out. He'll have a criminal record. He'll have difficulty finding employment. He'll probably struggle financially for the rest of his life because of what he did. That's not something I caused. That's something he chose when he decided to commit federal crimes. I'm actually pretty glad that's his reality and not mine. The last thing I want to say is this. If you're in a situation where someone close to you is clearly doing something wrong, don't protect them for the sake of family peace. Don't go along with dishonesty because you think it'll keep the family together. Because what actually happens is the dishonesty grows. It metastasizes. It destroys everything anyway, except now you're complicit. My brother only got as far as he did because people who loved him were willing to ignore obvious fraud. Don't be that person. Truth is uncomfortable, but it's better than the alternative. My life is good now. Genuinely good. I have integrity. I have real relationships. I have financial security that I built myself and didn't have to lie about. My brother has none of those things, and it's directly because of his choices. That's actually a pretty satisfying ending. If you've got a family member pulling this exact play right now, you need to see it for what it is and stop protecting them. Hit that subscribe button because the truth is always going to be more interesting than the lie.